Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. It's a cool evening. It's about 9:50 p.m. So man, I'm up early on this episode. If it's nighttime, I'm usually recording after midnight. Okay. Revelations. It's going to be a bit of a double entendre in this particular episode, if not a triple entendre, if I can do what I'm intending on doing. Why do this episode? Is this about the Bibles? Book of Revelations? A little bit. But what this is about, more obtusely, is the phenomenon that old people talk about end times and kids never talk about end times as being an event that's going to be right around the corner. And I've got a buddy who talks about it all the time and talks about it like it's happening tomorrow. And it's almost strange because it's almost like a bit of an arrogance in his voice, like, oh, Jesus is coming back. Okay. Hey, man, you're looking at somebody who would think that's pretty freaking awesome. One, to be born randomly in time and then be here when that occurs. It'd be crazy amazing. I'll take alien invasion or Christ coming back, either one or both. But there's this thing that just won't leave my mind, which is like, why is it only old people talk about end times? Young people, even after they've been confirmed at a church or whatever rite of passage you have to do, get the Catholic preacher to check your oil or whatever it is, you still will travel into your teens, into your 20s, and probably your 30s and your 40s, and you won't think about end times. And then all of a sudden, you hit that point. You hit that point, and it's end times, end times, end times. And obviously, it's different for everybody, but in terms of what year they begin to say this, if they are one to say this. But I think I had something click with me. Because there's an archetype of what is to be promised to us through a revelation occurring. And it's very similar to something I'm going to recap, which is one of my episodes in season 1 called The Alien Promise. I've mentioned it a couple times on the show because I've got a friend of mine who is very convinced that we're all exactly the same in a particular area because he read a book, and it was a book with a bunch of Freudian disciples who believe that every human being is tremendously terrified of death. And if you cannot articulate that you are tremendously scared of death, then you are a coward, you're a child, you're underdeveloped mentally, because what they're trying to insinuate is that you can't conceive of dying, because if you truly could conceive of dying, you should be terrified. On this show, we do not believe that at all. When you truly get to a belief system where you believe and understand that you are, for the lack of a better choice of words, a being of light, one that has a soul, and this body is merely a temporary vessel and a temporary journey that you will most likely repeat until some epic change occurs in the universe's fabric. Meaning probably not the mass universe that we're used to, but the one that's higher. If you lived forever, you got to recycle. You have to. Otherwise, you would go insane. That is my belief. Usually, outside of being, tortured or being in some very unfortunate situation, which is fairly rare, all forms of death are fairly quick and fairly painless at the day that you die. Now, you might suffer up until that point with some horrible sickness, and that's extremely unfortunate. What do they say about drowning? Drowning, you feel tired and you go to bed, is what they say. And then I guess somebody died that way, or enough people have died that way that this has become something they say. You can't breathe, you're on your bed, and you have this sputtering breath, and then eventually you don't take one. Suffocation is supposed to be fairly painless. It's just mind-numbing. Okay. I don't know what the method is for anyone. But when you're dead, and you're free. You're free of all of this. And I think that I'm going to guess that my friend, who obviously is extremely terrified of death, as much as he quips about, I'm not going to live that long. I'm going to go do myself in and all this other stuff. Which he's a very intellectual person. I don't think he's, he doesn't even have grandkids yet. He should relax a little bit. He's got an offspring that will most likely go that route. And it's like, relax, dude. Stop trying to be so nihilistic with life. But I do think that those that lean on rapture probably have one of two, if not both, hopes for their future. One is, I don't have to die. Oh my God. There's Jesus. There's whatever. Gabriel and Michael and all the archangels, and they're going to fight it out or whatever, but then you're going to get a chance to just get on the bus and go to heaven. You don't have to die of cancer. You don't have to blow your brains out. You don't have to do anything. You're just picked up and taken away. And then hopefully, of course, you've been a good person according to religion, and you don't go into some, benign void or some dark place. So that's the first thing that I think that people who love end times are going for, is they don't have to die. Because if you think about it, the chronology in the second thing, which I believe would be all the, you have this sort of subliminal, vindictive, super tired as you get older thing. And you just want all the bad people to get justice, and you want to witness it. You want to see that medieval painting where the whole town is getting slaughtered. But you want it to be all bad people, not the good people. All right. So you want to see some justice. But if you truly, again, depending on how Revelations is interpreted by a human being according to a Christian Bible, we're going to go on to other species of this. You may get picked up and taken away before you ever see the Nuremberg trials. I guess there would be this moment where you could say, hey, can I watch? Sure. Boom, boom. Oh, bam, pass the popcorn. All right. Seems a little strange. Seems like you're putting another thing on the list that then would have to be evaluated when Peter's reading off the crazy crap that you did. And then you ask to see people murdered and sent to hell. Well, yeah, it's like, I've never seen that before. For those of you that are probably under 30, could be a lot older. Let's just say life's been pretty booming. You got good careers. Man, you just go get the interview and you get the job. It's no big deal. You've always had money. You've always had your possessions. All right, cool. So you can perceive getting old. And maybe some of you have so landed it that you never will. But that's very few of us, right? I've made millions, but I don't have them because I've had partners who squandered it away. Once you cross a certain threshold, depending on where you live, how your society, where you live, respects older people, depending on what kind of skill set you have inside your body that is either still relevant or irrelevant, you will find that there's a threshold where age discrimination starts. And depending on your bloodline, how you've taken care of your body, it'll either cease to function or function well as you get older. So you could be on one of two paths. Things are good, things are awesome, or things start to suck a little bit. And then it's demoralizing as you notice these things starting to occur. I used to always hear that when I was young and I didn't understand it. Demoralization, like when they try to demoralize the troops, take the steam out of them. Because they would say, oh, we play, radio broadcasts over enemy lines to demoralize them. We drop pamphlets. We do other things to demoralize them. And I was like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I mean, I understand the definition of the words, but what does that really mean to the soul? And for those of you who've been soldiers in your lifetime or been in those situations, you know. It means that it takes the complete steam out of anything that you've managed to muster. You drink 10 cups of coffee, you're jittering, you're ready to do what you love, and if you're properly demoralized, it is as if those 10 cups of coffee have been removed out of your body and you've been given a bunch of depressants to slow you down. And now if you get anything accomplished throughout your day, it's a miracle. Well, if you're defending your country, some land, it's much more difficult to fight those fights because you just don't have it. You don't care. You can say that, F it, I'm not going to do this. I got so many possums in my backyard today. It's crazy. So the idea that you are encountering natural processes as you get older, but you also, depending on your tastes, will either increase your desires as you get older, meaning you feel like you need a better car, you feel like you need this or that, or you just want to maintain what you have and it's not paid for. These revelation things sound pretty amazing. You mean someone's going to come rescue me? It was interesting when one of my relatives, I should just put it this way, she was very young, and she was an only child at the time. And she told me when I was young, she said that when she was young, she used to fantasize about being a princess from a far-off land, and that her parents that are over her right now, which are most likely perceived as the disciplinarians, because that's what parents do, were simply just, holding her, and that this king and queen were going to show up and rescue her, and not only would she be tremendously important in the world by divine right, but she would encounter anything, she would receive anything and everything that she could imagine. And so I thought that, when I heard that story as a kid, I thought, well, that's really cool. You pretended to, and that's a neat little story, and and just go on with my life. And now probably, 42 years later, it's never left my mind as to, kind of who that person is today. And because that person today would be the last person to imagine anything. Very, very can't think for themselves kind of person. So it's kind of like, geez, you had to pound it out of you. I have to say, as much as I brag about the Midwest as I experienced it when I was younger, back in the 40s and 50s, there were some extremely bizarre people living there that really did abuse the minds of children. And, listen to George Carlin, who grew up in Brooklyn. It was almost like a nationwide American thing. And this is where Mr. Rogers, for me, is gigantic, because Fred Rogers, his whole thing was to say, children are, obviously, they're the future. Michael Jackson told us. But they're real beings, okay, which today we know that. But back in the 60s, 1960, according to Fred Rogers, there was no child psychology. No one paid attention to kids. It was like W.C. Fields, like, get away from me, kid. You're bothering me, right? And you had to fight your way up to being recognized as an adult, meaning you didn't exist until you became an adult, which is actually very interesting because everyone grew up a lot faster back in those days and tended to be more responsible and definitely built a better country. Maybe there's some secret sauce to this whole game. But I remember my own mom, she has this really cool painting that she did. I think it was in high school, but it's really good. It's like this painting of a countryside in Kansas, but it was very minimalistic, but very detailed at the same time. And there was a little cow up on the hill, I think with a fence down below, blue sky above, and it really looks like a very mature painting for a kid that young. Maybe that's where my art gene came from. It definitely comes from that side of the family, according to everyone else that ever became an artist in my family. But she said that when she was young, the teacher gave her a bad grade on that because the teacher said, cow, there's no place in Kansas where a cow's out there by themselves on a little hillside. Now, obviously, the rest of the cows could be on the other side of the ridge because it was way up by a ridge. I have driven through Kansas. I think I even pulled over my car at one point and took a picture of this. I've seen the exact cow scenario that she painted. So it's obviously BS. But she went to a Catholic school, I think up until high school, same as George Carlin. And George, said, screw you, I hate you, church, for the rest of his life, like I've been mentioning lately in the last several episodes. And my mom just absorbed it because she continued to grow up in a very Catholic family. I don't think her siblings had to go, at least not all of them, had to go to that same scenario. But the way that we develop kids' brains is how they end up developing perceptions as you get older. Because either you shake off the regulators that have been attached to you, the paradigms that were attached to you, to get you through a particular phase of your life, right? I think most paradigms are, you're playing a game with yourself between, say, 0 and 10. It's called magic. Magic exists. It's awesome. Somewhere between 10 and 18, you're finishing up your school, you're getting off on your own, you're taking on your own responsibilities, thus your parents start diminishing in their previous value. And then as you leave the nest, maybe you go to college, so maybe you're out by 22, depending on what kind of degree you get. But you're waking yourself up, you're getting yourself to class, all those things. What I find is this. The more fond you are of the way that you have grown up, the less you need revelations to occur. Any form of a revelation. We're going to go through an atheist alien one in a second. Doesn't mean you have to be an atheist to want the alien one to occur, but it's definitely the group of people that I think are more interested in that particular thing because they don't believe in Christ coming back because they don't think he was ever here. Okay. But if you're comfortable with what you have done, you look at the future and you go, okay, well, you know what? They say every day is a battle, and that's truly what it is. Sometimes you get on a good groove, and like you're walking down the stream of life, and every once in a while you find a little raft, and so you white cap it all the way down. You do some rapids, and then eventually the raft gives away, and you got to get on the sidelines and walk some more. I just watched the Twilight Zone To Serve Man, which is that actor who plays Lurch, shows up as an alien, the big giant head. He talks to this radio on his chest. He's just making peace with man. Everyone's trying to figure out why they're there. He drops a book off and leaves it there. It's all in his language, so he doesn't worry about them translating it. But man, they're feverishly trying to translate this book. And just at the end of the episode, they realize it's a cookbook. They're only there to cure cancer and to give us crops that will grow really well and solve all of our problems on Earth, to fatten us up, to basically be livestock for their people on the other side. It's a beautiful twist because the episode divides humans into two groups. The more intellectual skeptics and the more herdy populace. Now, even some of the skeptics turn into very excited passengers on these spaceships, which is the Forbidden Planet spaceship. But what is the alien promise? What makes us excited about the notion of an alien mothership hovering over our city in a peaceful manner, let's just say? I mean, you could have both sides of the fence. You could be, hey, I think it'd be cool if I gotta die it's their fault, not my fault. Therefore, I don't worry about how I died. It's not going to be a sin on my part. And man, I'll probably go out very quickly by some huge death ray. Or they hop out like Klaatu. They have all the fixes. Changes everything. The evil overlords that have gained control through fiat currency and world monarchy perceptions, where adult people play fairy tales with their country. It's just unbelievable, man. What's interesting is if you're in a country that has a king and a queen, and you watch shows like the 1981 Excalibur, that's the world that you've actually adopted. You've taken a fictional movie and you've adopted it. Some lady of the lake gave some ancestor of your king or queen some anointment, and now they reign above you. And because generations after generations have given them money, they get the best education, the best medicine, everything. They get the truth, and you don't. Might be time to kill that paradigm for a little while. Somewhere out there, the helicopter's coming. So the alien promises are actually fairly simple to understand. If they're good aliens, we're assuming they're going to do a few things. One, rethrow the overall command structure of our planet, whether they like it or not. Now, it depends on if they were to come to our planet and stay, or come to our planet and visit. And then what if they said, hey, we'll be back in 100 years. We'd really like to see you guys get to this point. One government, one world, one currency, one race, but not this, whatever we're doing wrong, which would be a very long list. See you in 100 years. And then, gosh, what happens then? I think they would have to maintain contact for us to not go nuts. And so then there's a question of logistics as to whether or not they can stay here indefinitely. If they don't breathe our atmosphere, they'd have to rotate. I don't know how it works. Maybe they live to be like 1,000 years old. So a mothership coming and going every 1,000 years, and or every 100 years or 200 years, they just do a little tour, a little exchange student program. But we want them to solve all of our poverty issues, all the things we could solve. But because of these crazy people who run the world, the most ignorant human beings in some cases, selling us out to perhaps the not so ignorant, it's going to be interesting. Maybe they extend our lives, but we want them to give us their technology too, in part. Now, we're not equipped mentally to travel the universe yet and join the rest of the Federation. But maybe they can give us a little something, make things a little bit better. Simplify life. Imagine if you could have a dwelling and food. Then working is a whole different game. Working would be something to better man, to better yourself, to have fun. A bunch of, folks would probably stay at home and play video games for a while. What's very fascinating to me is how quickly, and this has been debated several times, how quickly the aliens would just integrate into our minds. It'd be mind-blowing for the generation that existed prior to aliens. The second you have a baby that comes out of your womb, and they're raised with alien existence, well, that's going to be a quick 30 years, and then aliens being here is no big deal. Isn't that amazing? In 100 years, you would have, out of those 100, easily, honestly, from day one, you would start getting mature generations, I guess, somewhere 20, 30 years down the line. Because a 20 to 30-year-old person would exist who knew nothing more than the aliens. Isn't it fun? I'll give you a little analogy. When I was young, and all television was, all old TV programs were black and white, and then I saw Grease, which was a movie obviously made in the 70s, and it was in color. I asked my dad, I said something like, well, this isn't real because it's in color. And my dad laughed his ass off, and he's like, well, He goes, the world was in color back then. It's just the cameras that shot it weren't in color. My brain was like, oh, gosh, okay. And it's the same thing when you learn that just because it's raining where you are, it's not raining where grandma lives. What other revelations do we have at our fingertips? Because we don't really have the alien one. And honestly, we don't have any control over whether or not a religion is true. I don't know. I mean, I know they're out there, but I don't know of any religion offhand by name that talks about a second coming. Christianity is the only one that's created this Jesus is coming back thing, as far as I know. Very interesting thing that has been invented such that people can defocus from their life to focus on a potential event that every generation before them has also had plenty of citizens who, wanted it to be true. Now, Revelation is sort of, at its most fundamental archetype, is a person having all burden removed from them, at least in their perception. And especially their perception before the revelation actually occurs, because they don't actually know what life's going to be like afterwards. Because in this life, you're on your own, All right. I think a lottery ticket is perceived as a revelation. Why? Because it satisfies the basic component of having a lump of money enter your life and all burden, any outstanding bills, any fundamental needs that you have are covered. I mean, even in California, let's say that you won a $2 million lottery and they're taking 50%. So you're left with $1 million in the bank. Well, like I said, depending on where you live in California, if you live in one of the more lush areas, you can scrape by on 100. You won't be living in the lap of luxury. You can get a much better scenario about a 120, and you can live really nice 130 to 150. Anything over that is all gravy. All right, we'll divide $1 million by 100,000 just to get basic living. Now, if you leave the city and you go off to more internal regions, you can make that much better. But, let's just say you want to live in a house and not an apartment. So you got 10 years out of that lottery win. But for these people that win 10 times, 100 times that amount, all right, now we're talking about some real cash. $1 million gets you 10 years at basic level. 10 million cleared will get you 100 years. Pretty powerful little exponential, right? 100 million? Well, gosh, now you can change cars because the ashtray's full. But now, why make this episode just to beat these archetypes up? Because the inverse is what's actually happening, what's actually left. What's the old saying about your physical aptitude in this world? If you don't use it, you lose it. And ain't that the truth, man? Ain't that the truth? And what's interesting about that is that it really crosses over every single dimension of a human condition. Examples. Typically, that is referred to in the realm of physicality. I told the story several times about the 95-year-old man that came to my school and was lifting gigantic, heavy metal things into the back of his truck, such that a Golden Glove boxer champion farm boy went up to help him and was dropping a nut every time he had to put something on the back of the truck. And this guy who was helping him, this young kid, was 17, 18 years old. He could pick up, 50 bales of hay with a hook, stand on the side of a hay flatbed. Tough kid, man. So that old man, he always used his body, and so at 95, he was just like, yeah, whatever. I just wish at some point I could have, it was 30 years later, we could have videotaped that guy because it would have been a viral video of viral videos. No one would believe this guy was 95, and then someone would actually go interview him, and they'd be like, holy cow. Because when you see that, you see what's possible with your genetics. You don't have the same genetics as that guy, but it's possible you do. It's possible that you have better genetics. But I take just as good any day of the week. What other areas of the human condition does this address? Well, your brain. Hopefully this show, without congratulating myself on any episode, if I can just get you to think about anything, solving a problem in your brain of what you believe about a particular subject. You're a flat earther and I'm talking about globe and you're angry. Well, you're thinking about your flat earth. You're splicing and dicing all the stuff that made you think it's flat, and vice versa. You're a glober and I'm talking flat, and you're like, God, I hate it when people talk about that. And you're thinking about all the globe things that you think about. Regardless, you just probably manufactured a couple of neurons during one episode. And that's good. Just to make you think. Basic principle of this show. Well, the people that I know that are really leaning on revelations as a solution to not only current politics, current world status, they're exhausted. It doesn't mean they're not using it, but they are getting tired of using it. Now, it could be, quite frankly, that you have, let's say you got two people who are 60 years old, males. One person's overweight and diabetic. The other person's not overweight and not diabetic. Well, as they wake up in the morning, let's say they have very similar capabilities mentally. One's going to feel a lot easier, or going to find it a lot easier to get up and work every day. Do something interesting. Sometimes what you do is so rewarding, you don't notice through focusing the body deterioration process. Because of my friend circle / mentor circle, I'm now seeing my mentors get much and much older. And again, Sid Mead passed last December. I will tell you that, working with that man and seeing what he did, he was so incredibly focused. But the thing was, he was also a very three-dimensional, if not infinitely dimensional human being. He would just focus on the new project. If he had to get, a little bit of a little tiny eye surgery at one point, because apparently this is a fairly common thing that happens in some people, that the lower eyelid that's on the outside of your cheekbone can somehow lose its elasticity, and it just starts to droop open. It's a very simple procedure. If you ever have that happen to you, don't sweat it. It's a outpatient surgery. And you just get in there and tighten it all up, and it's perfect. It's a little tight for a couple months, and then it just goes back to the way it was before. So Sid, being this incredible movie designer, futurist designer, using your eyeballs is a big part of the game. His eyes work fine, but this thing's a little dry, and it's just an annoying thing. He postponed a lot longer than he should have to no damage to the situation, but he was working on a project that I brought through another mentor of mine. So he's designing stuff for a film of ours, and he waited till he got done with the second phase. Or no, it was the first phase. Then he went and did that surgery and realized it was just some super quick little thing. But Sid never talked about any revelations. Sid lived to be 86 years old and was raised in a religious household. So if you want to say whether or not someone would be prone to thinking such a thing, to get out of hardships of life, he might have been a fairly decent candidate on paper. Consequently, he never talked about religion much, other than just mentioning his experience as a kid, having a preacher for a father. So I think one of the counterbalances, my point of bringing this all up, is that the more that you can work to align your life with your love of life, Hopefully that's your job. You can focus away from these sort of right angle thinking towards reality, right? Because the revelation is coming in at a completely different angle than linear reality, which is I'm getting older every day and I'm working every day. That's my grind. I get up, shower, do my thing, go to bed. Repeat. Think about it. Jesus coming back, aliens coming, winning a lottery ticket worth $100 million. All those things feel exactly the same. They come in from the side, and it's like an escape route. It's an escape hatch to life. As I get older, and you tell me if you have the same experience, what I am finding utterly fascinating about life is that all the answers to everything are right in front of our face. But in a lot of cases, it takes all of us to understand those answers, all of us agreeing to engage those answers to solve the problem. If you had just a few more vanilla ice out there, the world would be a lot better, right? So then you find yourself kind of a captive of your own mind because you're like, gosh, we could solve world hunger. We could solve our economic problems. We could solve educational problems, probably everything through education I just mentioned. But you go to a university and you walk around, you talk to a bunch of brain-dead professors, many of them carrying paradigms from their childhood. They got their degree like 20, 30 years ago. And, if it's in the sciences that are very black and white, then there's no problem. You're a math teacher. You're a part of an area of science that either works or doesn't work, like chemistry or something like that, biology, something like that. As long as you're not being lied to in some of those areas, you're fine. But you find that there's this inertia, this giant pushback force within educational systems. That's why we need a Deep Thoughts University, man. So, in my opinion, because we have such, lazy approaches towards reality, some people bottom out and need these revelation end times thoughts in their brain to escape the loop that they're in that they don't like. What's also becoming extremely apparent to me in older age, and this isn't going to sound terribly profound in words, but it may be more and more profound the more that you think about it as well. Maybe. I'm not trying to put thoughts in your brain that are 100% true. I now believe that every microscopic thing that happens to you as a child is utterly, utterly profound to your character as you get older. Tiny things that you don't think matter at all, will change the entire personality trait of your child. It's almost like carbon dating. When they take a tree and you cut it down and then you look at the rings in the tree, and every ring is a year. And so you can count the rings and find out how old the tree is. Geologists that look at sedimentary rock, and they could find, burn marks within sedimentary rock, dust that looks volcanic. They can find out that that's because somewhere in that time frame, some volcano erupted and covered it all up. Sorry, there's a big diesel 2 houses over that starts up about this time of day. I also want to say, for those of you analyzing the audio, because I never said this in voice, I do have sprinkler systems that if I record between, I think it's on some graduating time thing. So it used to be midnight to 1. Now it actually is like in there 1 to 2 o'clock. So I think I've gotten around it, and then all of a sudden the schedule changes. So if you hear a little bit of hissing in the soundtrack, it's not necessarily today a bad audio issue related to the equipment. It's just something's going on there. Anyway, back to our subject here. You know that parents who have more than one child understand very clearly that every child is completely different in most cases. I've also known parents that are very balanced and have a very good regimen from day one are able to actually raise a number of children that are fairly the same because they got the same experience when they were young. Sometimes it's because the mom and the dad crank those babies out pretty much every 11 months. That definitely helps. But imagine you've had a child, or you were the child, and your parents are going through different stages of life. They had the first child. The parents are hopefully madly in love, and everything's really idealistic. Then life smacks them in the face. Now, if the parents are super successful financially, they continue in a different blissfulness, but may gain narcissistic behaviors, which remove the child from the parent, even within their own home. Other times, life gets hard. The parent becomes an alcoholic, starts beating the second child, starts abusing the third child in a different way, and everybody's way, way different. And I know, and if you've got brothers and sisters, plenty of you have had the conversation with your siblings. Yeah, well, that's when dad was like this and mom was like that, and so you got the better part, or you got the worst part. I'm really sorry. And you know that there's a difference, the way that you were raised within the perception of all things. My dad used to brag about this story that when I was a little kid in Germany, a baby, and it's really strange because my dad never raised any of his siblings because his brother was over a decade older than him. So he never was around sort of a daycare type scenario. Now my mom's completely opposite. She's the oldest of 5. So she ended up raising her siblings in a way that her youngest sibling thought she was an aunt. Very interesting, right? Especially that those two ever found each other. But when I was young, baby, first few weeks on Earth, there was a point where I would cry at night, and of course my mom would get up and comfort me as a kid. But there was a point where my dad said to my mom, I don't know how, I'm assuming I'm only a few weeks old, but he just told her, don't get up, let him cry it out. And after, this is his boast, after the second day, I stopped crying at night, and I slept all the way through the evening. And you can guess that I did that with my kid, and relayed that to her mom, and we both, she sleeps in the same room with us, so it's not like, physically, mentally, and telepathically, she knows we love her, and then we're in the room with her most of the time. But okay, so then my parents were young. They were getting hit by the 70s, which was all about, hey, let's make you a narcissist, and not in some super selfish, ridiculous way, but just that's what society was telling them to do, and everybody was doing it. And so as I grew up, parenting was always very sporadic. It was like, I think I told you guys, my dad tried to teach me how to ride a bike, but I was too young. Got in an accident when my foot went in the spokes with him riding it. Then it was 3 years later, my friend's father taught me how to ride a bike out in the country. My dad learned about that and was like, oh, crap. Some other dude taught my kid how to ride a bike. Well, he knows that for 3 years, he got so busy running a photography studio and driving for UPS, he missed a bunch of my childhood trying to keep all of his stuff paid for. Around the same time, my mom went to work as well at a bank. And so here's the thing. I don't have any, so finish that story. My dad got me a motorcycle like the next day. He's like, you know how to ride a bike? Yeah, here's your motorcycle. And he just teaches me real quick how to ride a motorcycle, and I was off to the races. Okay. Because of that crib experience, in my opinion, currently, believe that I was set up to be very independent. My kid was extremely independent. And what's the gift of that as a parent is that you don't have a kid that's like, constantly calling you to wipe their butt. They call you because they want to hear your voice. They want to share something that happened in their life. And that's just pure reward. It's really cool. So what did that afford me with my life? Becoming very independent. We're kind of a little off topic, but we're going to swing back around. The idea was when I wanted to pick up everything I owned and leave and come to California to follow a dream, regardless if I had to sleep in my car or not, which is what I told myself, I had the guts to do it. I had the constitution to do it. Sure, I was alone. I spent my 18th birthday in a room I was renting reading Stephen King's book Misery. And my buddy came home that I was rooming with, and I finally just had to tell him, it's my birthday, it's a weird day. And he's like, oh man, we got to go out. So he took me to an arcade and got some pizza. It was cool. Now, to relate this back to the subject matter, there's a very specific connection. The connection is that the more you become an independent person at a younger age, it can happen at any point in time. It's all good. You tend to own your brain. You tend to own your perception of reality. You do it subconsciously until you gain a point where maybe even someone simply says, or even asks you, do you think for yourself? And then you're like, but when you first hear that question, or you first hear anyone ask somebody else, and then you're like, oh God, do I? Well, what do you mean? Well, what do you believe and why do you believe it? Good question. Good question. And so what you end up doing, I think, is you take inventory of all the big ideas that you have swallowed over the years. Religion, perhaps, is a gigantic one. Me, I was a huge science kid, huge science nerd. Computer programming, well, there's not a lot of religion in that. Maybe an operating system is better than another at a particular time. Maybe a language seems more refined than another language, but not much to that. It's pretty much black and white. You use the tool that will turn the screw. That's pretty much all that is. But an existential belief system? Some of you believe a religion. Some of you believe in no religion and therefore very prone to the alien side of things. Nothing wrong with that. Some of you believe all the above. Some of you believe we're in a matrix. What's interesting about that realization, or shall I say commitment to thinking for yourself, is that you go from looking at the whole universe, especially in the 21st century, and you're kind of like, well, I've read a bunch of history, let's just say. Scientific history, exploratory history, meaning the Magellans of the world, the Christopher Columbuses of the world, people actually exploring the physical earth, figuring out what's hospitable, what isn't. Then you look at the scientists from Faraday to Tesla, then Einstein up to, say, Feynman, then all the Hollywood pop stars today, which are abysmal examples of their predecessors, right? You realize very quickly that in order to get into a cutting-edge realm of research in any of those particular areas, it's going to be really difficult. What are you going to do? Go to New Guinea and try to make peace with that tribe that the Rothschilds raped the girl on? You realize that's the official story, is that that island in New Guinea with that tribe that has barely been discovered by man. They know we exist now, but they said that some Rothschild got off a boat, raped a girl, and I think he was killed by them. And ever since then, anyone who even just drives a little boat by, they're out there throwing spears at you to get rid of you. It's interesting, even on that island without any Christianity whatsoever, the old rape thing is still well understood. Do no harm is understood. What a testament to man's construction. But the second you can think for yourself, oh boy. Frontier is an understatement, isn't it? You realize that for the rest of your life, no matter how old you live, I guess I should say how long you live, there's always a new frontier within those caverns inside your mind. As you become more existential, because there's multiple layers of our mind, right? As you become more existential, you start to realize things like, Well, if my intuition is correct and my experiences are correct, and gurus who go back thousands and thousands of years are correct, then you might realize that your mind is simply this construct. It's the combination of your soul and your body. If you ever achieve in your lifetimes an unequivocal belief in the afterlife, it is a revelation, but you're still alive. It's a revelation, but you're not heading off to heaven. You don't have all your bills paid for. But it brings a cool sensation of truth through your central system. Oh wow, I'm starting to discover the tiny morsels indicating what I really am. I had a funny a thought the other day. Now, if you believe in God, you will most likely pray to God in your own way. You talk out loud, maybe you say a little prayer at night out loud, maybe you say it inside your head at the church or what have you. But you develop this relationship with God over time. I will tell you that virtually everyone I've talked to in the last 20 years, when I say, hey, look, man, I talk to God all day long, out loud, as a matter of principle, they all say, oh, yeah, me too. It's like nobody wants to say it until they hear someone else say it like it's no big deal, or because there's no like, you should do it this way. It's just, that's my choice. And it turns out a lot of other people are having the same choice. What's cool about it is it's 100% your choice. No one walks up to you and says, you got to talk to God like this. They don't. But so the epiphany I had the other day involves the matrix itself. And I just can't shake that story I saw about the girl that died at the age of 8, and I believe the year was 1954. You've heard me mention this several times, but I'm going to mention it for a different reason today. But she said that when she was 8 years old in 1954, okay, you have to understand, she hadn't seen a lot of the stuff that she saw when she went to the other side. So there was no point where she could have watched a science fiction movie and seen what I'm about to talk about. But she said that she was in what can only be described as the Westworld area, where they designed and tested the hosts with glass, divided offices, computers. She said she described basically what a computer was, but small, with flat monitors and backlit keyboards. Now, she used a bunch of different terms because she had no industrial, descriptors for these things. Well, backlit keyboard, I looked it up. I think the first backlit keyboard was like the late 90s in the 21st or 20th century. Flat screens, well, man, those things were pretty rare. I just saw a documentary on a home that had a flat screen in 1989, which must have been a plasma screen or something from Hitachi. Glass divided offices, well, we definitely had that Art Deco glass. It's more like it's like a brick. You can't really see through it that well. Some you can, some you can't. They're very distorted, not what she was talking about. So imagine that she actually saw the fact that there's some sort of server farm on the other side. But she was physical when she died. That's what's interesting. No one's ever really talked about how, let's just say you're in that world, and here comes a kid walking down the hallway. Well, how does that work? How does that work? Does the kid materialize out of the car crash? Does she come out of some stasis pod? And it just lets her out, and then she doesn't really gain consciousness for a few feet, and so all she remembers is, as the stasis wears off, the dream of this reality replaces with the actual reality she's feeling. She said an elderly man came to her very quickly and guided her through the hallway down to the other side. They took her away from where she began and to another location and told her that it was time, not her time, and she had to go back down, the classic phrase. And then apparently, I guess she just kind of falls asleep and ends up in the ER or back in a car or something. What does a matrix offer us in terms of revelations? Well, what it says is you're a host in Westworld, and the only person controlling your narrative is a person who writes your narratives, like the wormy English guy who redeemed himself a little bit in season 2. But he's the guy that wrote all the narratives that Ford didn't write, which is Anthony Hopkins' character. He wrote all the original ones, and his kid was hired to take over narrative. And so if you're praying at night for your life to be different, it would be interesting if what you're really doing is talking to the programmers, talking to the narrative guy or girl or group. Why do people get to that point where they really lean on these end time scenarios, regardless of what they believe? It's because life has gotten hard. It's gotten chaotic. It seems to be fulfilling the prophecy of the book of Revelations. I thought about doing an episode, and I still might do it in this particular season, on prophecies in general. But I always find it very interesting that someone says that there was a prophecy written about something or someone, and then it came true. And this is why you should believe everything else this person said in their time frame. All right. Well, let's look at the chronology of a prophecy, because it's sort of, in my mind, self-defeating without it being extremely quarantined between the moment that it was written down and the moment that it occurs. I'll give you a prophecy that would be legit. I've said this, I guess I give you mine. OG listeners, sorry, one more time. Night before 9/11, I'm with my girlfriend. We're in bed. The room is lit. I'm looking at the ceiling, which is like this, smooth stucco. And I said to her, I feel like something bad's about to happen. And right after I said that, I saw 2 planes go whoop like this, parallel with the ceiling. And I told her, I think it has to do with planes. And she said, me too. Apparently she was saying me too to the previous statement, not the plane issue. And then the next day, 9/11 happens, and even though I don't believe planes were involved as they were portrayed, planes were definitely involved. But regardless, it was a prophecy that was from me to her. And no one called, the event that occurred the next day was premeditated for decades. So me saying that had nothing to do with the actual event occurring, other than seeing into the future in a very symbolic way. Okay. Let's say you're a biblical prophecy follower, and you're looking at Old Testament passages that predict, in your mind, the coming of Christ. All right? What's very interesting about that is that it's one thing to say that you think that the Son of God is coming and is going to complete the law, is going to get rid of a lot of things that eye for an eye is gone, sacrificing lambs is gone, he's going to die for all your sins, so you're completely resolved. So you can see this dude is coming and say a ton of things about him, but you can't change your life right now to align with what he is going to teach. For instance, what if I said, I prophesied that God is going to come down to earth next Tuesday, and he's going to say chocolate ice cream was a sin. So after Tuesday, we don't eat chocolate ice cream anymore. But if I were to say God's coming and he's going to do this, he's going to do that, and he's going to say that chocolate ice cream is bad, then I should probably stop eating it right now, because it's not just a sin on Tuesday, it was a sin up until Tuesday. We just didn't know the truth. Thing is, if you have a book in the Old Testament that has predicted something on paper 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years before before it actually is said to have occurred, let's put it that way, then the issue is those that are the most powerful people in the world could read the suggested prophecy and simply make it come true. Well, it could come true in 2 different fashions. It really occurs, and then it could be a matter of in some cases. Now, the Son of God coming back would be a very specific thing that would need biblical evidence, like miracles and things. But it could be like someone predicting an earthquake. Well, I could say to you right now, in 2021, there's going to be a massive earthquake in a particular city in the world. And just sit and wait. Just sit and wait in 2021. If I don't mention a city, boy, I can just, if you believe me, I can say, oh, see, that one right there is the one I was talking about. I could give figurative descriptions of the city, very metaphorical descriptions of the city. And, I could say, oh, it's tropical. I could just see tropical things around the city. Well, that could be Los Angeles because it's got palm trees that have been ripped off from other regions. Or it could truly be something in Malaysia, Indonesia, where tropical things occur. I could also just be sort of a fortune teller and go do a little bit of geological reading and find out general locations that have the most frequent earthquakes, and then program you guys to believe that I am some truth seer, some future Nostradamus. I've said a couple times recently, the Revelations itself and the Christian Bible talks about a bunch of different things. Some very spooky movie kind of things, hydras and the mark of the beast and all this kind of stuff. A lot of us now, because the mark of the beast is very interesting. The two correlations in my life that always makes me think of the mark of the beast statement is, one, every time I left Disneyland in the about 20 years ago, they'd want to stamp your hand. It always had to be your right hand. And when I said, well, why don't you do my left hand? They said, well, that's the gimmick. So if we catch someone with a left-handed stamp, we know that they forged it because we don't do left hands. The more recent one is being injected with a shot that has a chip in it, and there you go. You've been marked. It has an ID on it. And, of course, all of the technology associated with that could control your life quite a bit. The big one, though, is a unified currency. Well, even in, let's just say, I don't know, how, whatever you believe about the Bible being true or false, doesn't matter. This book starts to come together between 350 AD to about 1500 AD. Still pretty interesting. Now, financial systems were very sophisticated by the 1500s for sure, and I'm sure that anyone dealing with currency exchange, even barter exchange, would tell you that a unified currency would certainly simplify their job, for sure. All right. Seems like the passage existed so far back that our knowledge of history, which is very damaged, makes that a fairly brilliant statement, but it's been around for potentially 1,000 years. Let's just put it that way. That passage being written down. Well, now you've got bankers that read it. And they're like, wow, that is a pretty good idea. Definitely be the ultimate form of control. I'm willing to bet the money changers in the temple is something that was written in the Bible because everyone understood that those individuals were probably capable of being some of the most corrupt, manipulative, and powerful people in the region. If you're a money changer, you're someone who's changing things from perhaps bartered product, furs, gems, precious metals into a monetary unit. And then they could introduce corruption into that algorithm and start manipulating society. And of course, there's nothing more memorable than financial pain, except maybe love. And the proof in the pudding there is you could be rich and have no one who loves you in the world, and you'll feel as poor as the poorest person on planet Earth. However, you can be broke as a joke, but be so in love that you're the richest person alive. For me, the end times conversation coming out of someone, it breaks my heart a little bit, because the way I perceive that person is that they have started to give up, or they have given up on being effective in the world. They're already looking for an escape route. Mentioning it every once in a while, as we do on the show, We're simply analyzing it, looking at it. If we're to gain control over our minds and thus the world, that's why I don't believe that engaging that as an active thing is worthwhile. And what's interesting is, and I forgot about this until just now, I believe it is said in Revelations that no matter when end times occur, not a single being on earth will be expecting it. So as long as someone expects it, it'll never occur. Well, right now, it'll never happen because there's always someone who's suffering and looking for the escape capsule that is Revelations. Judgment Day. And it probably should be stressed. We've mentioned it lightly, but not stressed it. The other kind of upshot of believing in this time is that we really do see it as a moment where those that we believe who do wrong to society, if not to us personally, are going to get their just desserts. There's a friend of mine mentioned this 2 nights ago, and it struck me like a ton of bricks, and it's the Old Testament book of Habakkuk. And it's a individual talking to God saying, how can you possibly witness all of this injustice in the world? And it's only 3 chapters. And I will tell you that the first half of the first chapter will blow your mind, because he lays down his case very eloquently and very succinctly about, look, this is how the people are running the world, and it's so aligned with what we're experiencing today. And then after about 5 sentences of setting it up, the next section says, and God's answer was. And God's like, hey, what I'm about to do, you will not be able to believe. Not even if I told you what I was going to do, could you even conceive of the rapture I'm bringing. I can see why people lean on the Bible in these times. Trust me. You know, one of the ways you can kind of check yourself in the middle of this conversation would be to say, if you were given the option where you have rapture, judgment day, where you get to see the evil ones of your realm get their Nuremberg trial, they get sentenced and put to death, sent to hell, whatever you believe the punishment they should get would be. Do you get that? That is one scenario you're offered by God. I'm going to give you plan package A. But package B is that you don't see any of that. You just get to go to a better place where we're all living for creativity and love. But you don't get to see what happened. You just know that God took care of it. Which plan would you take, A or B? And if you took A, what does that say about us as people? That we need to see the punishment. It's one of those things of, again, there was this video that Dark 5 brought up. Dark 5 is a channel on YouTube, and he mentioned he had this one episode about weird recordings that have been caught by man. And the most terrifying one of them all, and it's terrifying. I mean, if your brain can entertain it for even 1 second as being true for what it was said to be, Russia dug this hole almost 9 miles into the ground. It is a sight to see when you see the hole. It looks like one of those natural holes that just is it's like a tunnel straight down, but it's big. And I don't know, I don't know exactly why they dug the hole, if it was looking for oil or something, just to see if they could do it, perhaps. I mean, 9 miles, man. Just put your mind around that. So you jump into the hole and you fall for, 6 or 7 minutes? I mean, it's like, woof, unbelievable. But when they had the instrumentation down there, it started melting because it started getting so close to the mantle, the magma, that instruments would only last for a really long time. So they took a microphone and stuck it way down there and just had the feed come up the wire And so even though the microphone's going to disintegrate, they're recording every split second that it's recording something. And the soundtrack they got back sounded, it's probably just, I mean, if it's not what it says it is, it's probably just hissing magma. I mean, it's literally like just water, air pockets sizzling, because it's being exposed to oxygen unlike it would normally be exposed because there's a hole dug to it. But it sure sounds like what they said it sounded like, which is the hellhole. It sounds like, and the Russian people actually pitched it like this, that they had dug a hole to hell. It sounds like thousands of human beings in a cascade of writhing, screaming voices. It's all together, all at once. And it's crazy when you hear it. I played it for a couple people and they were like, oh, turn that off, turn that off. The recording is, I think, 19 seconds or something like that. And you learn at that point who you are a little bit listening to that recording. I won't even play it on this episode. I don't want it to be infected by that sound, but you can go look it up and listen to it. You probably don't want to see or hear anyone get rapture. It's probably best you never know truly how horrible, if something like that were real, how bad it would be. You don't need to see it because that makes you sort of a weirdo. It makes you sort of a person that likes to see animals, getting cooked alive sort of thing. What's interesting about saying end times is that it's sort of, again, that sort of projection from the human being that's saying it. They're at the end of their rope, which is why they're psychologically attracted to a life raft, I should say, or a life vest, or something to pick them up and save them. I don't think we can afford to give up, and maybe I'm only saying that because I'm healthy. The human condition is designed to erode the body over time. I think there's two things that go on at our conclusion as human beings. And this isn't for every scenario, because some people have, like Walt Disney, the day that he dies, he was in Anaheim looking at the prototype of Pirates of the Caribbean, liked what he saw, told the guys, look, I got to go to the hospital. I'll be right back. And apparently he dies within 24, 48 hours of this throat cancer surgery thing, which is just as fishy as it can sound, right? Nobody just sporadically dies overnight of throat cancer. But he does. And I got that information from a documentary sponsored by Bob Gurr, so hopefully that's accurate. But normally what happens? We start to kind of lose our minds eventually. My buddy Sid never lost his mind, ever. I never heard him say anything goofy his entire existence, especially related to his health. But a lot of times that happens, right? People are over-toxified by the food supply, by the medicine, by the therapy they get for their illness. And so the family gets a chance to sort of pull back because the family's like, oh my gosh, it's not really my mom anymore. It's not really my dad, my brother, or whatever. And so you get to sort of say goodbye before they actually exit this place consciously. But us within the vessel, we're experiencing the same thing as age consumes us. Our sensors deteriorate. What we can do in life deteriorates, right? I was just watching that episode, and I forgot the name of it, but it's about Kick the Can. It's the Twilight Zone about Kick the Can. It was redone in the movie. And this old woman said, oh my gosh, I just miss running. She goes, getting old would be so much easier if I could run, if I could just run, because that was the one thing she loved to do. But if you listen to the subtext of what she's saying is that she can't run, so she's already said goodbye to running a long time ago. So you just keep saying goodbye to elements of your existence until it's time to renew. Hopefully there's a green room up there. little catering. There's so many areas of life where we surrender to other people's capabilities. I don't need to worry about how the water gets purified. I don't drink the fluoride. But, there's a lot of utilities and things that amenities that we're so used to, and we don't have to understand how certain things work as long as they're not killing us. And I think there's a sort of a metaphorical lesson about that and reality and God and the universe and whatever you believe to be true about the overall answer to why are you here? What is your purpose? Doesn't mean we're not really interested in what those answers might be. Researching it will be the only way that we gain more perspective over it. But isn't it, I think I said this a long time ago in an episode, when you watch Truman Show with Jim Carrey, there's that moment when he gets in the boat at the end and he sails away from the town. He just keeps going out towards the edge. And what happens? I forgot what you call that point at the end of the boat, but that thing goes through the wall. It's painted blue. And suddenly, any suspicion that he was in a matrix of some sort was satisfied. Answer, yes. You're in a contact lens of reality, a dome. You're a television show, he finds out later, I think. And so his purpose on this planet was, let's just say they did Truman Show 2.0, where he goes out and mingles with the citizens of the world, which are humans just like him, watching his show at the bar and what have you. And wow, what an epiphany that would be for him to see real reality without that idealistic scenario that he was living in. I think we all know we're trying to do a little Truman Show in this reality. We think, as human beings, perhaps foolishly so, that if we concentrate on why we're here and keep asking the question with every morsel, every micrometer of progress towards the end zone of this big giant football field, we are going to parse it at some point. We'll have the time bandage map at some point. We'll be able to control the universe, when perhaps that's exactly where we're going after this life, and that we've chosen this limited methodology of existing because it has benefits. I keep wondering where this show will go if I keep doing it for, say, a decade. Will we crack any of this mystery and get to the other side of something? Seems like we would, if all of us contribute in the comments and whatever social media we might have to trade information. I think the overall goal that this show has given me by talking to you guys and hearing your comments and then my own thoughts is that I've really come to peace with the journey of being temporarily human. It's an amazing thing. And there's so many metaphors in life that we experience that are exactly like being alive. How many of you have gone on a vacation where it was just the most perfect vacation? And no matter how much time you set aside to go on that vacation, there's that looming thing that you call the end of the vacation. And you realize that even if you come back to this location at a future time, it may or may not be as rewarding as the first time, especially. A lot of people move to Hawaii that are rich after visiting there. And they find out that the magic changes for them, and they end up moving back to the mainland. Some of them get it. Some of them get it long term. Got some friends that live over there. But one of the richest friends I know said he bought a house over there. He was a big golf course designer. And he said, man, I thought it was where I wanted to be. And then he goes, I felt so landlocked eventually. And he goes, I said, well, how many years did it take? He said, about 6 months. But 2 years, you're selling your house. I've been to Disneyland with a particular configuration of friends or a girlfriend. And that day, it was either one of the most exhilarating days, one of the most romantic days of my life. And I know that my mind is different now. If I found the girl of my dreams and went there and got engaged by the castle or something like that, it may not be as amazing as the date I had when I was 19 years old. That's life, man, isn't it? You're born, you have some good times, hopefully more than you have anything else. And time, the construct of man's mind to perceive change, to reference previous states of being, it's just an illusion. We need to have that concept in our reality to exist, but there's only the now. Revelations, I think you can toy with them, but I definitely don't think it's a mechanism to think about outside of a philosophical question. It's definitely not something one should rely on. How many of you are self-employed and you talk to a potential client and they shook your hand, they said, we are going to do this, whatever you do. And you know right away they've agreed to some money. It's going to come your way. Everything's in place. In 1 week, you're going to get the check. It's already in the mail. And so what do? You go and celebrate. You take your family out to dinner. Maybe you smoke a big fat cigar, whatever you do. Maybe you buy a car that you need because your car is broken down because you know you're going to have this money. And then the check never comes. The client changes their mind, and now you're kind of screwed because you relied on the future being already present. The problem with revelations is it's sort of a paycheck that may or may not come in your lifetime or ever. My advice is don't fear death. Do whatever you can to stay on this planet, be productive, have the experience. I'm certain that regardless of knowing what the true answer to life, the universe, and everything is, we're supposed to be here and we're supposed to be doing something. I think it's to be creative and productive, to be positive, to find yourself, to improve your soul through more experiences. I do think there are souls of all different ages, which is why even a religious person will say that a child has an old soul. Think that through before you hang up the phone on reincarnation. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. And more importantly, in the comments, if you could let me know if, one, you have a fascination with repeating the notion of revelations coming and the end times are here. What is your rationale for thinking that? But if you have relatives or friends that are constantly mentioning it, I'd be interested in you analyzing why you think they're having those thoughts. This is an old thing. As old as man. So anyway, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. There are 2 video. In fact, we've added brandnewtube.com, but they have a weird limit. So I've got 150 videos up there from our normal channels. But they've stopped me and said that I have to go pro to upload more videos. But when I click the Go Pro button, 404 is on their website, so they must be having some money issue. I'm trying to find out anyone complaining about this. So we've added that. All the podcasting you could ever consume. Social media, I have added Parler back because it was very weird when I first got into it, and now everyone's migrating to it, so we're up to date on that. It doesn't have every single video because they didn't exist back in the day. But it has, references to the last several, especially season 6. There's an all-new remastered season 1. There's a store, and there's 2 ways to donate to the channel: Patreon and PayPal. So for those of you who part with a little bit of cash, I appreciate it. What I'm going to start doing is posting some of the personal projects to my ability of non-disclosures up there, especially graphical ones, things where I'm creating artwork for clients, just so you can see. Because if you're waiting between episodes, you're like, geez, what's taking him so long? If you're on Patreon, for these Patreon people, they're going to be able to see the actual project, some animation or some render or something like that, and get a chance to kind of be satiated between episodes. So if that appeals to you, head on over to Patreon, put $1 in. There's no tears. If you believe that you know something you would pay extra for, do let me know. And I'll see if I can't work that out. But in the meantime, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.